Hey guys, how are y'all doing? This is Coach Garcia, so we're going to go ahead and see if we can go over our test review for Linear 8, 9, and 10. This is a lot of solving a lot of problems. I will not be able to go through every single one, but I'll try to hit the main points. This way I'll also be leaving you guys with hopefully a few examples so that you guys are able to go in and work on these on your own. Okay, so first kind of 6. I'll go ahead and show one of the solving and then one with the inequality, and then leaving you guys a few of these other ones so that you guys can go in and solve. Okay, so the first one we have problem A, we have 0.75 parentheses 8x minus 12 equals 0.2 parentheses 5 minus 10x. Okay, so solving, simple solving. I see that I have x, I don't have any y's. So this is just simply solving for x. First step anytime we have parentheses is to distribute. So we want to start off by distributing that. You can type these into your calculator, which I have my calculator here. We can start off by typing these into the calculator. 0.75 times 8 gives me 6. So we have 6x. Then 0.75 times 12. Negative 12 gives me negative 9. It's important that you remember whenever you're distributing that the sign right here sticks to that 12, making it a negative 12. So then that gives me negative 9. I can do the same thing on this side. 0.2 times 5 gives me 1, and then 0.2 times negative 10 gives me negative 2. Okay, so that's my equation so far. Alright, and then we come to this point. A lot of my students all the time, I've seen it in the past, they get stuck here because they don't know what to do. If we look, we have one x on each side, and then we have one sort of just regular number on each side. Okay, so from here we have to go in and we have to solve. So x is on this side, numbers on this side. So what that means is x's get to stay on the left-hand side, numbers get to stay on the other side. You do not have to label it x and y. You can label it numbers and x, but you just have to label it one of each. This helps because now I can say, okay, if x's get to stay on this side, out of these two, which one does not get to stay? Out of these two, the 9 has to go away. The 6 is an x, or the 6 has an x attached to it. This one does not, so I have to get rid of it, so I'm going to do plus 9. Whenever I add 9, I want to add it to the same one, so same type of number. So in this case, it's a regular number. So on the other side, I add it to the one that's also a regular number. That goes away. This comes down. This comes down. And then I have negative 2 plus 9, which is going to give me positive 7. Okay, now again, if I check my left-hand side, I have x's on this side and I have x's on that side. Okay, so now I jump over to the other side. On this side, I'm only allowed to have my numbers. Okay, so on this side, the 7 is the one that gets to stay, and the negative 1 is the one that has to go over to his side, to the x side. So we're going to subtract 1x. The 1 goes away, 7 comes down. Then we have 6 minus 1, which is going to give me 5. So we have 5x equals 7. Your last step, anytime you get to this, where now you have your x's on this side, numbers on this side, anytime that you get to this, your last step is always to divide. Technically, the operation that's happening between the 5 and the x is multiplication. The opposite of that is going to be division, so we go through and we divide both sides by 5. Okay, 5 over 5 reduces, we're left with our x. And then this we would type into our calculator. I always encourage my students to do alpha y equals 7 over 5, which gives me 7 over 5. Okay, so my solution here is x is equal to 7/5. And that's my final answer. Okay, we'll do one inequality, just to show you guys the inequality steps. Again, inequality is very, very similar. With this one, even though we don't have a pure equal sign, we can still draw our line down our inequality, splitting our equation. Again, I have a distribution step, so I go in and I distribute. I bring everything else down. Okay, so that's my first step so far. And then just like before, I can label my sides. I'm going to go ahead and label this one X, since the X's are already by themselves over here. I'm going to label this side numbers. And again, I always go one side at a time. So I start by covering these up, looking at that side. My left side is only X's, so I'm already done there. If I look at this side, only the numbers get to stay. So my very first move has to be to get rid of the one that has the X attached to it. I do that by subtracting 6X. Okay, positive, negative go away. These two come down. And then I have 3x minus 6x, which is going to give me negative 3x. Okay, next I can go in and simplify these. That's just simply 6 minus 3, which is just going to give me 3. And now my last step is going to be to divide everything by negative 3. Okay, negative 3 over negative 3 reduces. X is left over. 3 divided by negative 3 is going to give me negative 1. And then here's the only thing that you have to worry about whenever you're doing when you're going from a regular equation that has an equal sign to one that has an inequality. The only difference, you notice that all of our steps are exactly the same. The only difference is our inequality flips when we multiply or divide by a negative number. Okay, so it flips whenever we multiply or divide by a negative number, which we just did in our last step. We divided both sides by negative 3. So what that causes it to do is it goes from greater than or equal to, flips around, becomes less than or equal to. And so this is going to be my final solution. The way that we plot this, it doesn't matter where, just somewhere on there, go ahead and write down your answer. So I'm just going to go ahead and say this one is going to be negative 1. The inequality tells you which way you're going to shade, and then it also tells you what type of circle you're going to do. So we have a less than or greater than is going to be an open circle. Less than or equal to, greater than or equal to is going to be a closed circle. What all that means is that we shaded it. So it tells you what type of circle we're going to be using, again based off of these. Tells you what type of circle we're going to be using. So since I have less than or equal to on this, I'm going to go ahead and put a closed circle. All that means is that I shade it in. And then we have to shade it the way that it's pointing. So in this case it's pointing to less than, so I'm going to go through and I'm going to shade it this way. Left side. I can even draw an arrow showing that it would technically just keep going down that way. Okay, so that's inequalities. We can now jump down to number 2. Again, I'll leave the rest of these for you guys to solve. The rest of those, we can now jump over to number 2. All right, so number 2 says, Jacob solved the following equation for x. When he asked his friend Zach if he did it correctly, Zach tells Jacob that he made a mistake. Using sentences, explain where Jacob went wrong. So this actually shows up quite a bit on your STAR test. I see questions like this all the time. And usually they have things like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, right? And you're supposed to answer which step they got it wrong in. The best way I think to do this is to just actually go through and do the steps yourself, especially if you're good at solving. Usually you can go through and check the steps yourself, right? So I would just kind of write it off to the side, really quickly just go ahead and distribute and then see what he did wrong. All right, so first thing we have to identify in a problem like this is what exactly are we distributing. First, we always distribute the thing right next to the parentheses, which in this case is the 5. Anytime that you have a number, the sign always sticks to it. Whatever sign is next to it always sticks to it. So this isn't just going to be a regular 5, it's going to be a negative 5. and then that's what I'm distributing. I'm distributing negative 5. So negative 5 times x is going to be my first one, and then negative 5 times positive 1 is going to be my second one. The 4x, what this does is it just comes straight down. Okay, so my first step is negative 5 times x. Those just stick together, gives me negative 5x. And then negative 5 times 1 gives me minus 5, is equal to 10. Right, we compare our first step to their first step, and already I see the mistake. Alright, so whenever he distributed, he multiplied the first one by negative 5, but then for the second one he did not distribute. And then past that, I mean, all his other steps were correct. 4x minus 5x gives him negative x. The 1 he just brought down, 10 he brought down, then he did minus 1 on both sides, and he gets that negative x is equal to 9. He didn't solve it all the way, right? Technically we would divide all this by negative 1, but again, we can see his mistake, so I'll let you guys kind of write this out on your own in a full sentence. What exactly did you do wrong, and how should he fix it? Okay, we'll jump over to the next one. Which equation is equivalent to 2h minus 3t is equal to 12? Justify your answer. So you'll actually get questions like this on your test. That word equivalent just means equal or the same. So what they're asking you is which one of these is equal or the same as this equation here. The easiest way to figure out what you're solving for or what you have to do is to just simply look at your equations. Every single one of these equations is h equals. Every single one of these equations is h equals, which means that I have to get the h by itself. If I can get the h by itself, then I should be able to match it with one of these equations. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, so to get my h by itself, simple question that you want to ask yourself, out of the 2h and the 3t, which one do I need to stay on this side? The answer is 2h because I want the h by itself on the left side. So first question then answered is going to be I need to get rid of the negative 3t. I do that by doing the opposite sign, so plus 3t. 2h comes down, goes away. 12 plus 3t, I can't do it, so I bring them instead. I always tell my students, don't complicate your life, just bring them both down. Alright, so now we have 3t plus 12. I wrote the t first. I kind of switched the order of these two. I wrote the t first because on my answer choices the t comes first. That way I can just match it a little bit easier. Last step, I have 2h is equal to 3t plus 12. My last step is to separate the 2 and the h. Technically, whenever a number and a letter are stuck together, it's multiplication. So to undo multiplication, we go through and we divide. So we're going to divide everything by the thing that we don't want. We don't want that 2, so we're going to divide everything by 2. Okay, 2 over 2 reduces, we're left with the h. 3 over 2t is going to be 3 over 2t. And then 12 divided by 2, half of 12 is 6. So that is my solution, and that is going to match with answer choice A. Alright, number 4 says shoe size and foot length are related by the formula S equals 3F minus 24, where S represents the shoe size and F represents the length of the foot in inches. Solve the formula for F. So again, they're asking me, can I get one of these variables by itself? In other words, can I get the F by itself? Okay. Again, simple question that we have to ask ourselves. First, I see 2 terms on this side with the F. You just simply have to ask yourself, which term do you not need on that side? Right now, out of the 3F and the negative 24, I don't need the negative 24. I want my F to stay. I want to get rid of this. I want to slowly start moving all the other stuff away from the F so I can get the F by itself. So my first step is to do plus 24 on both sides. That goes away. S plus 24, a number and a letter, we can't add those together. We don't complicate our lives, so we just instead bring them both down. And I bring them down the way that I read them, S plus 24. I'm going to write that just as S plus 24. And I bring down my 3F. Okay, and now just like before, and you start noticing a pattern. Every single time, your last step is going to be to divide everything by 3. or divide everything by what we call our coefficient, which is the number in front of the letter. All right, so 3 over 3 reduces, we're left with f. So this equation's kind of written backwards. It's written as something is equal to f, but it's the same thing. 24 divided by 3 is going to give me 8. And then s divided by 3, I can't do it. Technically, to help me out in my calculator, I can put a 1 next to this s. So technically, in my calculator, I can type in 1 divided by 3, which is just going to give me 1/3. And then that letter s just sticks to it. Since the 8 was positive, I can go ahead and put a plus in between these, and so that would be my final solution. F is equal to 1/3 s plus 8. Next one, 15. This says converting Fahrenheit temperatures to Celsius and vice versa is a common conversion used in many areas of science. The formula can be used is C equals 5/9 F minus 32, where F is temperature in Fahrenheit, C is temperature in Celsius. The body temperature of a house cat is 40 degrees Celsius. What is the Fahrenheit temperature? Okay, so what we would do here is we would take this, plug it in for our letters, C, and then just go through and solve. Alright, so this now becomes 40 is equal to 5/9 F minus 32. And then we just simply have to solve for F. This brings up a good formula. Usually we divide by whatever we're trying to get rid of. So in this case, instead of multiplying by 5/9, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to divide everything by 5/9. Now, one really quick kind of side note on some math. The way that you want to get rid of 5/9 is by multiplying it by what we call its reciprocal. Its reciprocal is just the same fraction except flipped. What that does is it causes it to give me 1. If I can reduce this to 1, it pretty much goes away. Alright, so this, I can prove it to you guys with your calculator. If we simply type in 5 divided by 9 times 9 divided by 5, you'll see that it gives me 1. It doesn't matter what fraction I use. As long as I do the reciprocal of it, it always gives you 1. So that's how you always want to get rid of your fractions when you're multiplying. Instead of dividing by the fraction, you just flip it, multiply by the reciprocal of it. So I'm going to go ahead and take this whole side of this equation, multiply it by the reciprocal, which is going to be 9 over 5. And remember that if you do something to one side, you also have to do it to the other side. Okay. On this side, we actually have to type this into the calculator, so we're going to do alpha y equals 9 over 5 times 40, which is going to give me 72. On this side, however, this one's going to be easy because we already know that 9 over 5 times 5 over 9 is going to give me 1. So really I can just cross that out, and then just bring down f minus 32. And then my last step to get the f by itself is just simply going to be to add 32 to both sides. That goes away. That becomes 5. This becomes 105. So then that's my solution. Okay, number 6. Brendan owed James $1.75. Brendan decided to pay James in nickels and dimes. Write a function that shows the number of nickels n and the number of dimes d that James has received. So this is just, and we'll start seeing this a little bit more as we get into something called systems. But basically all we have to do is figure out what is a nickel worth, what is a dime worth, and then can we write an equation. The way that we write this simply is first we have to figure out how much is a nickel worth in terms of dollars. So out of a dollar, right, if we had a dollar bill, and we compare that to 1 nickel, how much is that nickel actually worth? Right, if a dollar is worth 1.00, how much is a nickel actually worth? The nickel would be worth 5 cents. We would write that as 0.05. Right? A dime, similarly, a dime it's going to be worth 10 cents. Again, if we compare it to a dollar, it's going to be worth 0.10 cents, or in other words, just 0.1. So from here, we can actually write our equation. So nickels, I don't know how many nickels he has. I don't know how many dimes he has, just because those things can change. So instead, we just simply write our equation as 0.05 times the number of nickels. So we're going to write 0.05 n plus 10 cents per dime, so 0.10 d. At some point, whenever I plug in numbers in there, they should equal the amount of money that I owe, which is $1.75. Right, so this should look something like this. Okay, step over to the next. Alright, for these next two, I'll go ahead and work one, and I want to leave you guys with the other. And I'll even break down the steps. Every single one of these has 2 steps. So now we get into something called converting equations. So before all we were doing was solving, right? Getting the x by itself, getting the x by itself, getting the x by itself over and over and over and over again. Now we have something called converting equations. So now we have 2 equations. I'll write them. So these two, 7 and 9, are related. And then these two, 8 and 10, are related. I'll go ahead and write their equation. So this equation is going to be y minus y1 equal to mx minus x1. This is known as your point slope form. And then the equation over here is standard form, which is ax plus by equals c. Okay, we're going to convert both of these equations back into just regular old y equals mx plus b, which is our slope-intercept form. Right? So first, let's go ahead and start with our point slope. So whenever you guys see an equation in point slope form, it's 2 steps. Since I'm not going to work number 9, I'll go ahead and write down the steps right here. Step number 1 is going to be to distribute. And then step number 2, add or subtract the number on the y side. Okay, so 2 steps. First one is going to be just simply to distribute, getting rid of those parentheses, which I can kind of show you guys here with this one. We're going to distribute twice, making sure that this one you can't do on your calculator. This one we just stick together with the x. The other one you do with your calculator, making sure that you include the sign. And then the last step is just to get the y by itself. I have to get rid of this plus 2, which I do by minus 2. All right, so if we look at the problem up here. Again, first step is going to be to distribute. So first thing I want to do is distribute this negative 1/4 to both of these. So negative 1/4 times x. You cannot do that in your calculator. Your calculator cannot calculate x. So instead we just stick these two together, giving me negative 1/4 x. Okay, so that one's pretty easy. The second one, whenever I distribute the second time, make sure that you include the sign along with that second number. So that sign sticks to it. So on our calculator, when we calculate this out, we're going to do negative 1/4 times negative 12, which gives me positive 3. Since it's a positive 3, I'm going to go ahead and put plus 3 equals these two. I always tell my students, always try to keep it in a row, keep it in line, so that we're not, doing steps that are all kind of catty corner from each other. So I'm just going to go ahead and bring these two down. So now I have y minus 4 is equal to negative 1/4 x plus 3. And so we've gone in, we've distributed. Now I want to add or subtract the number on the y side to get rid of it, right? Because at the end of the day, what I want is this y completely by itself. So in order to do that, I have to get rid of this minus 4. The way that I do that is simply just plus 4. I line it up, since this is just a regular number, I line it up with the one that's just a regular number over here, which in this case is the 3. The y comes down. The positive 4, negative 4 go away. The negative 1/4 x comes down. And then the 3 plus 3 is going to give me a total of 6. So then my equation, or my solution, is going to be y equals negative 1/4 x plus 6. Okay. Again, I'll leave you guys this so that you guys can work it out on your own. And now we'll look at the second one. So now we go into standard form. How do we convert it from standard form into slope-intercept form? This one has, again, 2 steps, and it's always going to be the exact same 2 steps. Step number 1 is going to be to move the x to the other side. Step number 2 is going to be to divide by the coefficient of y. And that's how we get the y by itself. Okay, so again, same exact 2 steps every time when we have something in standard form. You know that something's in standard form when you look at your equation and you see x and y on the same side. Pretty simple. Okay, so from here, first step is to get the y by itself. Or in other words, the way your thought process should be, okay, which letter do I want to stay? Which letter am I solving for? The answer is going to be y. We always want to solve for y because we want to get it into y equals mx plus b. So if I want to solve for y, it means that my very first step, I have to move my x to the other side. The way that I do that is I just simply do the opposite sign. So in this case, we have just a regular 3x. I have to assume that it's positive, so the way that I get rid of it is with the negative 3x. Okay, positive negative goes away, 5y comes down, and then we have this equation, or this expression over here, negative 25 minus 3x left on this side. Again, we don't overcomplicate our lives. One of these has a variable, x, the other one does not. This makes them 2 different things. So I'm not going to overcomplicate my lives. I'm not going to force them to combine if they don't. Instead, I just bring them both down. Again, I want my equation at the end to look like mx plus b. So some people like to put their x first, just because so that it starts looking like your equation. I'm one of those people, so I'm going to go ahead and write negative 3x and then minus 25. Okay, so step 1 done. We've moved the x to the other side. We don't ever combine these either. We always just bring them both down. Okay, so we move the x to the other side. Then we divide by our coefficient of y. Coefficient is just a fancy way of saying the number in front of y. So whatever number's there, that's what we divide by. In this case, it's a positive 5, but if it was a negative 5, we would divide by negative 5. Right, so I divide both sides by 5. And whenever I divide, I usually go through and just show that each one of these is being divided by 5. 5 over 5 reduces to 1. We're left with y. And then we have negative 3 over 5. You never type in the x, but you can type in the numbers. Negative 3 over 5 gives me negative 3/5. It's up to you as an algebra student to remember that that's the one that has the x attached to it. And then for the other one, you're going to make sure that the sign sticks to this one when you type it in. So that negative 25, that negative sign or that minus sign sticks to that negative 25. So when we type this one in, it should be negative 25 divided by 5. Oops. Sorry, I put 2. Negative 25 divided by 5 is going to give me negative 5. So now this one is my solution. Y equals negative 3/5 x minus 5. Again, same exact 2 steps every time, depending on what it looks like, depending on if you have it in point slope form or in standard form. Again, it's really, really important that you're able to realize that, and then if you remember your 2 steps, these should be no problem. Okay, moving on to 11. Again, I'm not going to work through every single one of these, but I do want to show you guys just how we would work something like this out. Okay, so first, I just want to point out that number 12, I'm going to work the easier one. I'll leave you guys to work the other 2. So number 12, 2x plus 9y equals negative 18. The way that we would work this out is we would come back up here, follow the same 2 steps. So you're going to move your x to the other side. So we're going to do minus 2x on both sides. Bring both of those down. Divide everything by 9. Right? So move it to the other side. Divide by your coefficient. All right, so that's the exact same steps. On this side, number 13, again, this one is in point slope form, so our two steps here are going to be to distribute and then to do +1 on both sides to get rid of that -1 on that side. Okay, it's important before you can answer the question of which equation is parallel or perpendicular that you get your equations into y equals mx plus b. Okay, you have to have your equation in this form before you can answer this question. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to do the easier one. I'm going to do this one that's already solved for me. For the other two, you do have to go in yourself and solve. Okay, but on this, when we look at parallel, we focus on one thing, and that is our slope. Okay, simply that m. So all I'm going to focus on is just the 2. So my slope is 2. If we want a line that's parallel, I have to have the same slope. I guess I need to include lines. Parallel lines have the same slope. All right, so if I'm writing an equation that's parallel to this one, if I'm creating my own, that equation might look something like this: y equals 2x. So you see how the first part of this is technically the same. And then the only difference is going to be that I can't have -8. If I do, it's going to be the exact same line and not a parallel line. So I just need any other number. Literally any other number that you want can work instead of -8. So for this, I'm just going to say +5. All right, it doesn't matter what number I pick as long as it's a different number. I can even show you guys on your calculator how this would be parallel. So I graphed the first one, 2x minus 8. Graph the second one, 2x plus 5. Again, this one I just created. I just came up with the 5. There's not a magical way of coming up with the number. I just made it up. If we hit graph, we see our first line. We see our second line. We see that those two lines would be parallel. Never touch, never getting closer, never getting further apart. And of course, you would do the same with these after you solve them and cut them into y sum x plus b. All right, I'll show you guys real quick with the table. With the table, it's a little bit different. I would have to first go in and figure out what is my change, rate of change. So I would have to find delta x and delta y. From -6 to -2, I have +4. From 0 to -2, I have -2. I'm going to do one more just to make sure that it's consistent. From -2 to 0, I have +2. From -2 to -3, I have -1. And I guess I'll do one more. 0 to 6 is +6. -3 to that is going to be -3. Okay, so all of these numbers are different, but they'll all give me the same thing as long as I match this one with this one with this one, and that one with that one. Right, and it's always delta y over delta x, which is going to be -3 over 6, or -1 over 2, or -2 over 4. No matter which one I type into my calculator, they're all going to give me -1/2. So my slope is -1/2. That means that an equation that's parallel to this one is going to be y equals -1/2 x plus or minus whatever I want, as long as it's not the same. Now with this, I have to figure out first what's the y-intercept of this one so that I don't mess up and create the exact same equation. Remember that your y-intercept is always in the form 0, b on a table. So I'm looking for the 0 on the x side, and then I'm looking for the number on the y side. So I see that here with the 0, -3. So 0 is there. My y-intercept then is -3 for the original. So for my new one, I just need a number other than -3. It can literally be anything, or no, +8, right? As long as it's different. Because if I just don't want the same line. So then I can go through, I could graph both of those equations, and I could show you that they're parallel. For one that's perpendicular, again, and you notice, and you see that, and you can imagine your test is going to be a lot of solving. As we work through this, just really quickly, I can show you guys again If I draw my line down my equal sign, I have x and y on the same side. So again, same 2 steps. Take my x, move it to the other side, divide everything by, once I do that, divide everything by 3. For 17, I'm going to distribute twice. Then I'm going to do plus 4 on both sides, just to make sure that I solve. Then on this one, I'm going to move my x, and then divide by, I can put a -1 in between the negative and the y, and then I divide everything by -1. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and do 17 just to show you guys again a step with the distribution. But again, before we can answer this question of perpendicular, we have to get our equation into y equals mx plus b. Okay, so we start off again with our first step of distribution. The first one we just stick together, 2 times x gives me 2x. The second one this one we can do in our heads, this is pretty easy. 2 times a positive 5, 2 times 5 is 10, so I have positive 10. These two come down. It's going to be a good idea for you guys to get a few of these worked out, just so that you have that repetition in, so that you don't struggle as much, hopefully, on this test coming up. Okay, so now I have 2x plus 10 on this side. I have y minus 4 on that side. Again, to get my y by itself, so again, step 1 was to distribute. Step 2 is to move that number next to the y by doing the opposite thing. So in this case, I have a minus 4. To get rid of that, I'm going to do plus 4. And I always line it up with the other number on the other side. That goes away, y comes down, 2x comes down, and I have 10 plus 4, which is going to give me 14. So I have y equals 2x plus 14. Alright, now that I'm here, to get something to be perpendicular, you need to do 2 things. Again, we're going to focus on the slope, so we're going to focus on that 2. But whenever something's perpendicular, 2 things have to happen from that slope in order for this to be perpendicular. First, I have to make it into a fraction, and that fraction has to flip. My fraction has to flip. Second, I have to also change my sign. So you want to think about it, in order for this to be perpendicular, you have to change everything you can about that 2. One thing that we can change is the sign. The other thing that we can change is how it looks as a fraction. Right, so we would have to do both of these things to that 2 in order to start coming up with our own equation. Usually I show this kind of with a little time chart as I go through, so I would start with that 2. I'm going to go ahead and draw some arrows. That's going to be my first change. I'm going to come up with something, and then I'm going to show another arrow, and that's going to be my second change. That's going to be the second thing that I do, and then I should come up with my final slope that I need for my perpendicular line. Alright, so first one, from that 2, I need to first flip the fraction. It's very difficult to flip this as a fraction if it's not a fraction. So first thing we have to do is make this into a fraction. The way that you make any whole number into a fraction is you just simply divide it by 1. Okay, now I can take that fraction and I can flip it. 2 over 1 becomes 1 over 2. So I now have done step number 1, which is flip the fraction. Step 2 is simply to change the sign. So right now it is a positive 1/2. If I change the sign, it now becomes a negative 1/2. So this is going to be my new slope for the line that's perpendicular to this. So whenever I write my new equation, so this is my original equation, y equals 2x plus 14, then my new equation is going to be y equals negative 1/2 x. And then once again, you choose your number, whatever number you want, plus, I don't know, 4. And so that would be my equation. Again, that plus 4, I just made it up. There's not a magic way to do it. You just come up with your own number. But the important thing here is that when we compare our 2 slopes, that you do both of these things. Flip the fraction and change the sign. Okay, moving on to 19 and 20. On this one, again, you're just writing down things that are perpendicular to this. So for 19 and 20, first thing you have to figure out is your slope. And then once you do that, do your 2 things, which is flip the fraction and then change the sign. Coming up with your new equation. All right, 21. What is the equation of a line that passes through the point 4, 2 and has a slope of 0? Or what is the equation of a line, and I'm skipping down to 24, Or what is the equation of a line that passes through the slope 4, 2 and has an undefined slope? I'm going to show you guys how to work this. This we work with something called Hoy-Bucks. And this is actually super easy. So Hoy is horizontal. O is technically a 0, and that's 0 slope. And then Y is just simply Y equals. Whenever they ask you to write something with a 0 slope, your equation is going to be Y equals. It's that simple. Whenever they want you to write something with a vertical slope, or what we call an undefined slope, it's going to be an x equals equation. And you just simply get both of these by just looking at your equation up here. Right? Our points are always in the form xy, x comma y. So your equation, the way I always like to think about this is I'm going to go ahead and write them both down. I'm going to cross out the one that doesn't work. So x is equal to 4, so I'm just going to go over and write x equals 4. Y is equal to 2. We're looking for a slope of 0, so that means that I'm going to use Hoy. Hoy says my equation has to be y equals. I don't need the x equals 4. My equation is simply going to be y equals 2. Right, I can do that for the next 3. Again, my x value is -1. My y value is 6. They want me to do a slope of 0, which again is going to be the Hoy, which means I need y equals. That's my equation, not that one. Right, pretty easy. We can work our way down. I'll let you guys do the next one. And then for the other 3, this time they want me to give them an undefined slope going through that point. So now instead of Hoy, we're going to use Bucks. Again, same thing, same setup. I'm going to say x is equal to 4, y is equal to 2. This time they want me to give them an undefined slope. Undefined slope is x equals, so I don't need the y equals. My undefined slope is going to be x equals 4. Right, and you can do that for the other 2. I'll leave the other 2 up to you. Again, super easy. You don't even have to think about these. All you literally have to do is write down Hoy-Bucks, and you got these instantly. This is going to save your life on the test if you don't have it or don't already use it. All right, last ones, and I may not get through every single one of these, but again, I'll go through most of them. I have left you guys a lot to do, I understand that, but this is a long review, and you can imagine there's going to be a lot of solving on your test. Okay, so first it tells me draw the line x equals -7. So I see the equation x equals. That's not something I can type into my calculator. X equals shows up in Hoy-Bucks, in the Bucks part, so I'm going to write that down. Alright, so I have a vertical line, a line that goes up and down. It has an undefined slope, and it's going to be x equals, in this case, x equals -7. So all you have to do is on your x-axis, go over to -7, draw your point, graph the undefined line, which is going to be a line that goes just straight up and down. Right, so there's my line. Which axis, the x or the y axis, is this line parallel to? So going across side to side is my x-axis. Going up and down is my y-axis. This line here is going to be parallel to my y-axis going up and down. So this is parallel to y-axis. Which axis, x or y, is this line perpendicular to? So if we now compare this to our other axis, that creates what we call a right angle, which is what has to happen if we have a line that's perpendicular. Right, so in this case, our line is perpendicular x-axis. One thing that I'll say here, don't confuse yourself with x equals, so it has to be parallel to this, or x equals, so it has to be perpendicular to that. I always say go ahead and draw it out and then just look at it one by one. Right? Don't confuse yourself with the whole x equals y equals equation stuff. Just go ahead and graph it, look at it, and then ask yourself, okay, what does this line up with? Okay? Part D says now graph the line that is parallel to the original line. So all I have to do is just draw a line that's parallel to it. If it's a line that's going just straight up and down, I just have to literally go anywhere else on the graph and just draw a line. That same thing goes just parallel, just goes up and down. So it just rises without ever running. So there's the line that I created. Again, not a magical way of me creating it, I just created it. There's my line. It says, what is the equation of the line that you just drew? So if this one was x equals 7, right, that's the one that we graphed originally, sorry, -7. Because it goes through the point -7, then this one, by process of just elimination, has to be x equals +2, because it goes through 2. Last one, graph a line that represents -2 plus 6y equals 18. And 29, graph the line that represents 3x minus 2y equals 12. So once again, it comes up. We're in standard form. We cannot, as much as I want to, we cannot graph a line from this form. I can't just say, okay, x value is going to be 2, y value is going to be 6, and then just draw the line. I can't do that. We have to solve. In order for you to graph, your equation has to be in y equals mx plus b. It just has to. There's no way around it. There's no shortcut to it. We just have to graph our line that way. So, again, it's the solving steps. Our 2 steps, again, were move the x, and then divide by coefficient of y. Alright, you see that those 2 steps come up all the time, and it's always the same 2 steps. Again, I noticed that it was in standard form. Standard form is x and y on the same side, so it's these 2 steps. Move the x, divide by the y. So to move my x, I'm going to do plus 2x. 6y comes down. Again, we don't combine the x's and the numbers, we just bring them both down. So we have 6y equals 2x plus 18. Alright, first step, pretty easy. Second step, divide by my coefficient of y. Your coefficient is the number in front of y. So since this was a positive 6, I'm going to divide everything by positive 6. That goes away. Our equation I'll go ahead and write down here is going to be y equals. I can do this on the calculator as long as I don't type in the x. So all I have to do is type in the 2 over the 6. Two over 6 gives me 1/3. So my first fraction is 1/3. That one's the one that has the x attached to it. My other one's going to be alpha y equals 18 divided by 6. 3. So then that's my equation. From here, now I can graph this on my graph. So once I get it to this, now I can graph it. So plus 3 is going to take me up 3. I'm going to put my very first point. I always started out this way. I always do the plus 3 first. That's your y-intercept. All you have to do is go on your y-axis, find that 3, find that number, plot it down. Then I'm going to go ahead and cross this out. We no longer use that 3 ever again. Every other point on my graph is based on my slope. When we're graphing, we're going to do rise over run. Rise over run, I have 1 over 3, which if I rise, remember that rise means either going up or down, run means side to side. So if I run 1, that means that I'm going to be going up 1. If I run positive 3, just by simply looking at my numbers on my axis, I can tell that positives go to the right. So if I run positive 3, I'm also going to be running to the right. So from that point, all I'm going to do is follow the steps over and over and over again until I get all my points. So up 1 over 3, put a point, up 1 over 3, put a point, up 1 over 3, put a point, until I can't do it anymore. If you want to, you can take this, you can reverse it so that you can go the other way. So we would do down 1 to the left 3. You just have to make sure that you reverse both arrows. I can also do that and go the other way. So if I go down 1, left 3, down 1, left 3, down 1, left 3, I can get all the rest of my points And then from here, if I have a straight edge, I can go through and I can connect all of my points with a nice straight line. Okay, so that would create my graph. Okay, that's all the time we have. That's all the time we have for our review. This is a long review. It's a lot of solving, but your test is going to have a lot of solving, so you have to make sure that you're going through, that you're working all the solving steps, or you're working at least until you understand how to solve all your solving steps. Again, two different solving types. You have the one where you simply have to solve for x, so make sure that you guys practice that, as well as the inequalities, and then make sure that you also practice your, what we talked about, our two steps, depending on if you have it in point slope form. First step is distribute and then add or subtract the number on the y side, or if it's in standard form, it's always move the x and then divide by the coefficient of y. Okay, so just make sure that you guys are practicing this, make sure you guys are solving. Again, Hoivux is going to be big, so just good luck. And always remember, make sure you guys ask your teachers questions if you don't understand something. All right, this has been Coach Garcia. It's been good having you. Good luck on your test tomorrow.